This week we've been commemorating the 4-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and now a new graphic novel recounts those harrowing days when the lives of people in and around New Orleans were changed forever. AD, New Orleans After the Deluge, tells the story of 7 ordinary people, among them a high school student, a young couple, and a 6th-generation New Orleanian poet and singer. Their stories started out as a web series before taking shape in the beautifully illustrated and moving graphic novel that's been getting rave reviews in recent weeks. I'm happy to welcome the book's creator, Josh Neufeld. Josh, welcome.
Thank you.
So Josh, it's a beautiful and powerful novel. Why comic book format?
Well, I'm a cartoonist, and I've always told stories that way. That's the way I've been expressing stories since I was very young. I'm just very drawn to that medium. And I think it's important for Americans, especially who sort of have a misperception about what comics can be, to not confuse the medium with the message. So,
yeah, you started as blog posts because you went down to the region soon after the hurricane happened. Talk us through how you got from blog posting to comic format.
Well, as you said, I volunteered with the Red Cross after Katrina. And was eventually trained in disaster response by the Red Cross and was deployed down to Biloxi, Mississippi, where I worked for about 3 weeks as a Red Cross volunteer. I blogged a lot about those experiences, and while I was doing that, I got responses from other people who'd volunteered and from people in the area that we were serving. I was basically traveling around neighborhoods that had been just devastated by the storm surge there, and feeding them prepared lunches and dinners, and just developed a real rapport with the people I was working with, and started to really understand just the pure physical devastation of the storm and get a sense of the experiences that people had had there.
You know, my first reaction when I heard about this was like, a comic book to tell such a devastating and tragic story. It almost seemed, just on kind of first glance, a little maybe insensitive, yet on reading it, I was so moved. It was so powerful. Was it tough to take a genre that one associates with more light entertainment and tell such a heavy story?
Well, as I was saying before, I think there is a real tradition in comics, not only in American comics, but also in European and Japanese comics, of telling very serious and important stories in this form. You know, examples include Harvey Picar's American Splendor, which is an autobiographical story that was made into a movie a couple of years ago, and Art Spiegelman's Mouse, memoir. There's been a lot of important memoirs that have been done in comics form, like Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis, which I think a lot of people know, or Alison Bechdel's Fun Home. So it was never a question to me of the appropriateness of doing a comic book treatment of this story, as much as I just felt like it was really important to me to tell these individual characters' stories correctly and sensitively, and be respectful to them and their experiences.
I mean, it's not quite journalism, but it is. It's a form of art, but not a traditional form of art. Can you talk about where the two meet?
Well, I think that's exactly it. I mean, the work I did in background and interviewing these people was journalistic, in the sense that I found them through typical means that journalists use, by using sources in the area, reading other stories, listening to the radio, finding friends of friends and all that kind of thing, finding people who would be willing to have their stories told this way, and then interviewing them, photographing them, going down and visiting them in their places that they had ended up in, or if they were back in their homes, doing all that kind of background research.
Were people skeptical of having their story told in a comic format?
Actually, surprisingly not. There was one character, Denise, who at the beginning just had this perception that comic book meant funny, because the word comic, is funny, which once we explained to her that we intended to do it totally seriously and respectfully, she was on board just like everybody else. So that really wasn't much of a problem. And then as soon as most of the characters actually saw themselves online as in the first iteration of the book, they were even more happy to take part.
So let's talk through some of these characters, because I myself, as a journalist, have been traveling down to the region a lot, have spent a lot of time with people down there, taking people's stories and trying to find a way to tell them that won't just seem like it's just another story. And I think you've done that very successfully in this book. How did you do that? Because you have so few words that you can use.
Right,
It's
right.
really about capturing critical words and putting them with an image.
That's exactly it. I think that's a lot of the challenge of doing comics, is finding that economy of words where the picture complements what's going on in the frame, and using them to simultaneously tell the story rather than to just read the words or just look at the pictures.
I mean, do you sit there and you like play with words and cycle in and out of quotes? Should I use this? Should I use that? Like, what's that process? Talk us through.
Yeah, definitely. I had the good fortune with a couple of the characters, with the character of Leo and the character of Denise, to actually have their blogs that they had kept during their experiences as resources. So I had a lot of great source material that I could then decide what to keep and what to take out, and how to, as you were saying, edit a lot of words into maybe one or two pictures that would get all of that information across. So it was a matter of sort of just trying to balance the different storylines and get the emphasis of the different experiences across, and edit what I had and make it all work. And a picture is worth 1,000 words, so that helps.
One of the things that I think was particularly arresting to me in some ways was that all that you described that happens to characters, from their experience in the Superdome to just even that decision, do we leave or don't we leave? We know that happened. We saw it, yet for some reason in this economy of words and just with these few images, I felt really culpable. I felt like, how could we even, as a nation, have let this happen? I mean, you in one of the stories, a grandmother dies in the Superdome. And I wonder if you could just...
I was at the convention center, actually.
At the convention
yes,
center.
Yeah.
Just talk through why you chose certain elements of people's stories. Like, how did that make it in?
Well, when I started the project, I knew there were certain archetypal stories that everybody associated with the New Orleans experience with Katrina. One of them that was very resonant with me is the idea of losing all of your possessions. So I wanted to have a character who suffered that experience. I also wanted to have someone who dealt with the flooding in some way, because that was obviously a major part of that story, were people who were trapped in places where the water just kept rising and rising. So the character of Abbas and Darnell deal with that. And then it was very important to me to tell the story of the Superdome and the Convention Center, because I think so many people had a misconception about what actually happened in those 3 days after the hurricane, when people were trapped there. And there were all sorts of stories of rape and looting and mayhem and gang violence. And
you definitely hit a lot of stereotypes. You definitely challenged those, which I found very powerful. I want you to talk through one image that has just stayed with me since, and it's a father who is holding his baby up. It's just one image, and he's basically saying, this baby is dying, help me, and there's no help.
That was a very difficult image to draw. It was something that Denise witnessed for herself, and it was something I felt was really important to show, to sort of just communicate the extremity of the situation there, and how the people at the convention center literally were left entirely to their own devices, and the authorities, if there were any, all they did was drive by with their guns pointed at the very people who were trapped there, and not giving them food or water. There were stories of big trucks filled with water driving by and not helping them out. So that was an example, unfortunately, of a tragic thing that happened there at the convention center.
Josh, what do you hope this book does? It's 4 years on. I mean, these are things in the past, they happened. What's your intention for this book?
Well, I think your response, in a way, it epitomizes what I'd like to do with this book, which is to remind people about this experience, for this to be a document of Katrina, just like journalism is, and television coverage and documentaries, and to enable people to have some kind of intimate and emotional response to the experiences, to sort of put them there for a moment, and let them see that these are real people, their lives are continuing, the story of New Orleans is continuing. And
just very quickly, where are some of these characters today?
Well, fortunately, most of them are doing very well. Almost all of them are back in New Orleans or back in their homes. There have been a lot of things in the meantime of rebuilding and buying new possessions, finding ways to build their lives up. But I think they're doing well. One character, Abbas, says, I never expected myself to be right back where I was 4 years ago. I wanted to be 4 years further on in my life and career. So I think just now maybe people in New Orleans are starting to feel like New Orleans is New Orleans again.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.